Hello, everyone.
Welcome one and all to JWC Livestream. JWC Livestream. This is the classic story autopsy with Ricky and Tom. I'm Ricky. Hello, everyone.
I'm Tom. How are you?
There's Tom up there. It's been a wild ride in the non-creative world of late, and boy, oh boy, am I glad that we have creativity to retreat to. Helps center your soul and purge stress from your awareness, or at least it does for me. And I know in particular, those things are poetical terms, but point is you can't, when you're a creative obsessor, when you're a hyper creative, you can't not write, you can't not draw or paint or compose or whatever it is you're doing. You have to do it. You're thinking about it all day. Making money is swell and all, but I don't feel satisfied unless I write a good chapter or I have some sort of episodic satisfaction derived from creativity, hopefully on a daily basis. So Tom, how have you been lately, and how's your creative life going?
Oh, things are going really good. I have lots of time to write, so I take advantage every minute I can. I'm in the middle of a Pencom story, The Women of Aton, about the Women's Historical Society of a small town, using they have a dead person as a murder weapon, so to speak, a zombie, vengeance weapon. So pretty interesting. And I came up with a new Pencom story when I was writing my story, The Deadly Mile. Near the end, somebody pops up that seems to be directing all the creatures, and a friend of Pencom's calls her the Dark Lady. And Pencom says, yes, I thought we destroyed her a long time ago, or killed her, or drove her off. And so I thought about it, why don't I write that story, how a friend of Pencom and Pencom, they get together to investigate just some people getting killed in this town by entities. And it turns out to be this Dark Lady. I created a mythical dark witch from the post-Salem times that did not want to become a good witch, so to speak. I created this thing, the United Witches of America. And they become an important, what do you call it, protective society to working with the FBI, etc. It's pretty involved, but she did not want to, and she started killing off the so-called good witches that were going along with the priest, and they finally put her to death. They burned her in this gigantic pile of wood, and the lightning struck the fire, and she disappeared. So now she's basically going around, popping up and committing mayhem. So they get embroiled in that, and so it was interesting. She just, as I was writing The Deadly Mile, I said, I just said, what's that over there on the roof? And I said, what could be over on the roof? And I went to bed. I popped up in the morning. I said, of course, it's got to be this woman, all dressed in black with light around her, and she's very mysterious. And they called her the Dark Lady. And now it's finally bounced around in my head long enough. I've got a story. Pencom's friend who was in The Deadly Mile with her, her name is Aurelia, and she is one of Allison Haywood's professors and her mentor. And Allison is Amos's fiance. So there's a whole big mix of stuff going on there. So I think it's getting very, very detailed and lots of interlinking pieces, and building a whole world, much more than I had originally thought of with 30 years ago with Pencom. So it's been a lot of fun.
It occurs to me that you have the makings of a fantastic franchise there, especially with all the retronautics that's going on and whatnot. And I love your alternate reality, your paradigm you've created within John Pankram's universe. Every time I hear about it, I'm like, I want to know more. But it's also how it interfaces with what I do with Nidhogg Chronicles. There's a similarity in the paranormal fiction. They're two different worlds, but it's a like muse, so it gets my head going. Like, you know how it goes. Like sometimes you're like, oh, that story's awesome. If I had a character, what character would I write in that story if I was collaborating in that story, in that paradigm?
Right.
A lot, like, you know, when I read Emily, it's like what was I thinking I would write if I was writing an Emily story that had Emily in it in that world? Like, what would I write? And it's the same thing with any other book I've ever read. And your world building is such where it's very easy to do that. So it sounds like you're engrossed in that. That's really cool. I have been working on I was working on all this stuff, but then I had a couple weeks ago, I had this massive muse flash for my Afternity books. And I have 4 Masroths. I mean, 2 of them are in print and 2 of them are getting put together. And they're pretty good. I mean, it's a little whiles away from getting them put up, I think. I mean, I'm hoping it's by the end of the year, but I don't know. Point being, though, is the Afternity Muse is really, really, really big. And starting in 2011, this is what got me novel writing. I wrote Cyberdonia. And Cyberdonia was very raw and in a terrible zero draft for years because I just kept writing. I didn't go back and deal with Cyberdonia. I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing. And it's best to just let the bullet train keep flying. So I did all these books, like which are now 7. They will be 7 books, hopefully. What's going on is they're all varying lengths. They're like 60,000, 80,000. They're all over the place. And they have this core narrative featuring these characters, Galrana and Zophitheth. All right. And they're going through some trials and romantic stuff. Now, when I wrote Book of Masroth, there was this character that I had been thinking of since 1994. This guy, Saber. And Saber is like a machine. He's a robot, but he's like a barbarian robot. He was he was designed to hunt and destroy evil, malevolent things that hide from the light. And he was raised he was sort of raised by dwarves. Those are the ones who kind of taught him to be a man, as it were. So he's got this like very hard brow attitude towards the eradication of evil. And he has a brother named Sickle, who is sort of demented and evil himself. So the brothers were always fighting each other. So long story short, I'm writing them. And Saber was always a character in the Zophitheth plot line. But since I have all these novels that have these missing gaps, I'm going to write this giant solid plot line B and just weave it in throughout all 7 books and get them all up to 100,000 words. So I would then, like, Afternity would then be almost 1 million words written, if you think about just Afternity, because it'll be the 4 Masroths, the 3 Malithorias, but then there's this Cyberdonia 1-2, Draconia 1-3, Martyr's Field 1-2. So if I can do this within the next couple of years, I'm going to be stoked. Is basically what I'm saying, because I'll have a large chunk of this property, and I'll also have my other stuff in print, which I'm hoping will be earning sales. See, my whole thing is like, it's great to send query letters and summaries and do all this legacy stuff. But to me, the real meat and potatoes is, here's my sales record. Here's what I do to advertise. and yet here's what I'm selling. And if your record's like decent enough, then you're like, I have this big property. Like, why don't you guys help me out? Nah, I don't know. Maybe it's naive, and maybe I'm a goose. In fact, I'm pretty sure I'm a goose. But you know where I'm going with this. I've been telling you for years, like what my mindset is as far as industry is concerned. So I'm writing. I wrote 10,000 words last week of this thing. So I write another 30,000 words, and that's plotline B for Cyberdonia 1. And then I would do an integration protocol, and then I would have the book basically ready. And I'm just going to hopefully keep doing that. I don't know how long it's going to take. I estimated it's probably going to be over a year to do all that. Because it's outlining, then writing, then integrating, and then it's a zero draft then. So, but I'm having a blast, Tom. I'm not going to lie. Like, I love writing this stuff, because Afternity is like where my heart lives, honestly. I mean, I've been having fun, and I have tons of other stuff I could be working on. But anyway, you get my drift, man. So this is great. You're working on stuff. I'm working on stuff. We're psyched. At least I am. I'm speaking for myself here. So for today's episode, do you have anything to read for us, Tom?
I do.
So why don't you lay it on us, man? Because your reads.
I have a little short piece called "It Happened Right Here." This was an exercise in trying to keep something under 1,000 words, set in a very short period of time in one place. I try to do something kind of creepy, shocky. Oh, the theme was drive-in. Somebody gave it was a writer's prompt.
Yeah.
And I said I could write a story about drive-in, so here we go.
Awesome.
It happened right here.
Yeah.
Did you ever read about that family who died in that fire 20 years ago? Yeah, Sally said, squirming in her seat. The house is right at the screen out there, said Bob, pointing to the big screen. Sally looked out into the dimming light. The screen filled half the windshield, framed by trees lit by the setting sun. Okay. What about it? Sally said. It happened right here on this spot. 20 years ago, tonight. My mom reminded me of it just before I picked you up. I left to pick you up. That's nice, Sally said. I heard that the drive-in owner set the fire to move the screen back for more cars. Is that what you heard? Yeah, it is, Sally said. My parents wouldn't come here for years because they were mad at the owners for doing that. I don't think that's what happened, Bob said. Want some popcorn? Yeah, maybe a root beer float. Very adventurous. How about a hot dog or something? Maybe after the first film. Sally said, you got it. Bob slipped in the car. Keep the doors locked. Why? There's a lot of creeps out here, Bob said. Anything could happen. Sally watched Bob walk toward the only building on the property. It held the projection booth, the snack shop, and the bathroom. Her neck hurt as she turned back to face the screen. That's when Sally saw the figure. It came out from behind the screen, slinking along the bushes running around the drive-in. As Sally watched, the shape moved along toward the lone car in the lane. The Oldsmobile Omega sat in the dark shadows of the trees. No lights were on in the automobile. Sally sat in silence as the person crept up to the passenger side of the car. The figure disappeared behind the car. In a flash, the interior light came on in the car. Sally could see a struggle as the figure dragged someone from the car. The door slammed, and it all went dark. Sally watched as the dark-clad figure, hefted a body in its arms and moved toward the woods. They went into the trees and were gone. A moment later, the door opened again, and the light went on. Sally couldn't believe that no one saw it. She unlocked the door and got out of her car. Fear clung to her. Her big hair bounced as she moved up over the mounds that raised the cars. No one looked in her direction as she drew close to the car. Hey, you, she screamed at the person pulling the man from the car. The figure paused, letting go of the unconscious driver. It backed away and walked toward the trees. Sally jumped as the screen lit up. The familiar sound of the Friday the 13th theme poured from the speakers. The lights blinded her for a second. She blocked the light with her hand and scanned for the figure. He had disappeared, and so had the driver of the car. Confused, she looked around. The trees were dark. Sally looked into the car, empty. The lot, half filled, swarmed around the center where the food and bathrooms were. Only a few cars parked this far away and alone, filled with passionate couples not interested in movies. Sally spotted the police car patrolling the lanes with only its parking lights on. She walked quickly toward the car, anxious to get back to her own car. The police cruiser stopped when she stepped in front of it. "What do you need?" said the policeman in the passenger side. "Someone attacked two people in that car over there," she said, pointing to the Oldsmobile Omega in the far corner. "Are you sure?" "Yes, I am. It was only a few minutes ago." "We'll check it out," said the cop. "Have fun watching the movies, and be careful." The car drove away as slow as she had seen it. It pulled over the nearest hump and drove back the other way. Sally saw Bob coming out with his hands full. She ran toward the cars, meeting him at the car. "Where were you?" he asked. She told him what happened. Bob closed one eye and shook his head. "Come on, really?" "It's true," she said. "Look." She pointed at the police car that stopped at the Oldsmobile. "Get in," he said. Sally climbed in. Bob sat looking at her. "You shouldn't have done that," he said. "Why?" "You should have just minded your own business." He bit into a burger. Ketchup ran down his chin. "Those people were being attacked," Sally said. I couldn't not say anything." "You brought the cops into this?" "How unfortunate," he said. Over his shoulder, Sally saw two other individuals come out of the bushes and take two more people from a TR-7. There came a struggle, but it ended quickly. "It's happening again," she said. She went to open the door, and Bob locked it. "What are you doing?" "Stopping you from getting killed," he said. "What?" These people have to pay for killing those people 20 years ago," he said. "What do you mean?" Bob smiled and took another bite. The ketchup dripped onto his white t-shirt. 20 years ago, I was born out in the woods back there," he said. "I would have been born in a house, but it burned down. My mom was the only survivor." "That's terrible." "Yes, and tonight we get our revenge on those people in a big fire out back." Take me home, now. You're disgusting." "I'm sorry you said that." The door's unlocked. Someone opened the passenger door. Sally looked to her right as two strong hands gripped her arms. "Bob?" she asked, as a dark figure pulled her out of the car. A cloth covered her mouth, and she lost consciousness. Bob smiled and turned back to watch the movie. So there were elements in there. It had to be set in the 80s at a drive-in. It had to be a horror thing. It had to be less than 1,000 words. So,
Yeah, I mean, bravo. Okay, from beginning to end. And I got some questions that I want to ask you about this. I'm not trying to rush through this. Now, I learned a lot from Flash. When I first ran into Flash, I was horrified because the notion of a complete story in 1,000 words, that's intimidating. I'm talking about like what you just did there, because you have to be hyper efficient. Like all your references were there. People, if they don't know what a drive-in is, that's a generation thing. But anybody that knows what drive-in is, instantly you're plugged in. Okay, it's a drive-in, and drive-ins are magical places. Anybody that's ever done a drive-in, it's like, wow. Big screen outside, everybody parked next to each other. There's something very interesting there that transcends the vaudevillian model of theater because of the automobile. In vaudeville, they packed everyone together close because they were just trying to make a lot of money off the tickets, because that's why they were in business, entertainment. But when you have the cars and stuff, there's another dimension that goes on there because you're each in your own little bubble. And that bubble you use the bubble very effectively. But I won't get it. I'm not going to get ahead of myself here. Her bouncing hair, the Friday the 13th theme. the imagery, how you pack in everything in there, hyper efficient. That's really the key behind Flash, is the hyper efficiency. Every single line has to have like 3 factors of purpose in order for it to really enhance the story. Because you got a beginning, middle, and end, 1,000 words. Now, Tom, you make it look easy, man. you make it look easy, and it's not easy for everyone.
No.
What you did there and how you laid it out, especially him coming in just robotically eating, and then there's this confession, and it seems like he's trying to get her to play along, almost like he wants to pull her in. But obviously her moral compass is not going to allow that to happen. And that's when like you talk about how the fear was clinging to her. That's the beginning. The beginning is she knows she's in danger. And you conveyed that very, very quickly, that there's something wrong going on. And it's not from the beginning, but it's almost from the beginning that sense is there. Very, very impressive. What is your...
Although it sets it up from the very first sentence. Do you remember what happened here 20 years ago? Or do you know what happened here 20 years ago? Boom.
No,
right.
I understand.
So,
I understand that. What you're doing is you're placing it in the unconsciousness of the reader, because just because it happened 20 years ago, that doesn't mean it's going to happen now. I mean, obviously, if you're reading a horror collection, it says Tom Tiernan, you know, it's not My Little Ponyland. You know, it's going to be something terrible. But my point is you planted that was a suggestion, but then eventually the fear grips in, and she's like, well, what does 20 years ago have to do with now? So how do you, when you set out to write a Flash like this, because you're as far as I'm concerned, your shorts are all excellent. But when you do a Flash like this, what is your consideration of beginning, middle, and end? How do you manage the pace that you do? Because you're a plotter, you don't do outlines.
Right. This particular one, usually the Flashes, I'll write till it's done. And a lot of times it comes in 1,100, 1,200 words. I said, okay, I've got the whole thing. And then I start trimming it. I find it easier to trim than to add. You know, you could tighten the suspense by cutting words and bits and pieces and you know, adding, if I only got to say 910 words and I needed 90 more words, that kind of would feel like padding.
Mm-hmm.
So this one came in around 1150. I said, okay, I have 150 words to trim. And what I had to do was also, I was given the parameters on this Flash fiction contest. I got we really like this, but not enough to include our collection, which is okay. I got a nice email back when I submitted it. It had to be 1980s drive-in. You had to include things and to make it obvious that it was 1980s. The poofy hair, the Friday the 13th, and the 2 automobiles. The Oldsmobile Omega and the TR7 really only were available in the 80s.
Well, those
and
that's an impressive amount of detail that gets you in without having to go. It was the 1980s. That's the whole thing. Very, very efficient, and it's also furnishing your setting and your world building. So that's a very interesting
Plus,
thing.
I threw in the thing about 20 years ago. That's kind of a thread that runs through the original couple Friday the 13th movies, where after the first one, they go says, "Do you 10 years ago? Do you remember what happened right here?" I kind of use that. I like to do a riff on like a Friday the 13th mood.
Sure.
Where in those movies they always said they're sitting on a fire or they're at the campground. It goes, "Oh, we're opening this camp for the first time in been 7 years." So I wanted to get that kind of mood that something similar, unusual happened 20 years ago, and
right on.
that all these little bits and pieces, that I said the hair is easy to do. Just throw in a reference to her hair bouncing or the big hair, And
Yeah, I'm all about it. It makes a lot of sense to me. And it grabbed me because it helped me to see the imagery of her walking through these cars. See, there's a little hologram in there, like a bit of mind theater. That's for me. That's why it was important, because I thirst for images. I want to see the movement and stuff, because that to me is the narrative driver. She's going from one place to another. And so it sounds to me like this story was inspired by a prompt. You were
yeah, it was.
because I was going to ask you like what the muse for this was. So you went to some site or whatever, and they encouraged you. They were like, "Do this," or go
Yeah, I
ahead.
was on there's a writing site that I have. Every once in a while they throw out. They said, "Hey, we're doing we're looking for some stories, some flash stories, and it's a contest that goes, here's the theme, boom, please, and it's 1,000 words, give us, convey the 1980s drive-in terror, um, you know, and so that is a pretty good little foundational core that I could run with, rather than just trying to think of something off the top of my head. I really would love to get tune into more prompts so I could do a whole bunch of flash fiction. That would be really great to just take these little prompts.
Well,
You
I'd be
know,
willing. I'd be willing to lean into a flash show with that premise. In other words, like once a month we give them, because that's flash is important, because to me it helps your chapters. Like you have no gross budget, you have no minimal budget, maximum budget. You write until it's done. You're pantser, and that your stuff's great. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the great dualism of the writing universe, is pantsing and plotting. My point is, um, uh, when you lay that stuff out, it helps with your chapter, because it helps you develop the mechanism of pacing. When you're a plotter, you need to formulate pacing. You have a talent that some people don't have. You can pace in your unconsciousness. It comes out paced. You already have read enough where you don't have to worry about it. But when it comes to budgets, I can't do that. Even when I was a plotter years ago, a pantser rather, like I was saying with Cyberdonia back in 2011, that the first manuscript was a horror. It needed so much work to put it back together. And I learned a lot from pantsing, but eventually when I started doing budgets and stuff, now it helped me develop the whole thing and pull those out of a terrible state. And that's a talent, man. When you can pants pacing like that, you just said how you did it. Even if it goes a little bit over, you come back and you trim the rose bush until you get it where it needs to be, which is sort of when I was first doing this stuff, that's sort of how I went about it as well. So bear that in mind, folks. Lastly, Tom, your endings are always great. And endings are not these things that just fall out of a tree and into your hand. Like endings are a big deal. There's plenty of fantastic writers who don't know how to end stories.
Sure.
And yours are consistently ended well. Like you have a comprehension of what the ending is. I want to ask you, like, how do you achieve that time and time again? Because again, no plotting, you're pantsing. So what's your mindset?
Right. I do like stories that have a surprise ending, or like O. Henry's story, like the Gift of the Magi, there with she cut her hair to sell it to buy him a expensive watch chain. He sold the watch to buy her a beautiful comb, and that's how it ended. I love those I love endings like that, where I can just pull something out of a hat and something you don't think of, and so that's kind of where I do any kind of piece, especially Flash, where I have this little tiny nugget of an ending in my mind, and I write toward that. And I I'm not saying it doesn't happen all the time. I will write, and I do work on what do you call it? And I think they don't always pop up immediately. Sometimes they do. Um,
Yeah,
and
yeah. I was
sometimes
gonna.
often I'll end a story. I'll just stop writing, and I'll come back to it, and I'll play with the ending. I always think that endings are extremely important. They end properly, just
Yeah,
as important as they open properly. Everything in between, you could do anything you want, but you need to have a pretty good beginning or an end. Um,
yeah,
well, I did a story, that story about that the clearing in the woods, about that thing that's eating the trees and leaving the ground perfectly flat. At the
yep.
very end, um, I just had it where one of my characters is a real smart aleck, and her supervisor says, what do you call it? We're liable to get in a lot of trouble for what happened today. And she said, the character says, nothing happened today. We just went on a patrol. Done. They're willing to just let it go, and not mention again. So, but
Mm,
endings. A lot, especially in a flash fiction. I won the Dark Stranger with the music festival.
yeah,
Um, it just I can as I'm writing a lot of times as I'm writing, I can see the ending coming, and
yeah, yeah. Because
it's interesting. I can't explain really how it. I thank you very much for telling me that I have pretty good endings. Um,
oh yeah, you do. I mean,
it it takes a lot of work,
yeah, because
and
you like it's like you're saying you need. I mean, you've read like crazy, like all over the place. That's why it's all in the sponge upstairs. But what I'm saying, and that's not to de-emphasize the voice, because what you do is amazing. But you know yourself, everybody's got to read well to write well. I
yeah,
see
well,
all
yeah,
these questions. I see all these questions. Can I write a book without having read anything on these things? And it's like, ooh, you got to get a compass, my friend. You don't you don't know where
yeah,
you are. You don't know where you are if that's what you're talking about. If that's actually how you think. I mean, that's not a question. Everyone stands
it,
on the shoulders of giants. And
sure,
if you don't end stories well, no one's going to read your next story. No one. In other words, like, even if they like the beginning and the middle, if the ending leaves them like, what? Like, if they're, huh? they're not gonna, that was a great story, or he's a good author, she's a good author, them, whatever. Point being is, ending stories is a big deal. It's a huge
yeah.
big deal, and you do that. So right on.
Like
um
the monkey's paw is a really short piece of work. If you know the story where the old couple
mhm,
wishes that their son, uh, they wish that he would come back to, they could have him back, not realizing that,
yeah,
he was already dead, but so this dead body is coming in, and at the very end, the doorknob turns, and what's on the other side of the door, but the story just ends as with the
mhm,
doorknob turning. And I love,
yeah,
I prefer, and I really like stories where when you finish, you'd like to have more.
yes,
So
yes.
that's why sometimes I like to try to do that with my own work.
Yeah, yeah, I've
Because
said it many times. I've said it many times before. Endings are new beginnings. Otherwise, they don't end properly. There has to be a
mm,
prompt to the next thing. And the next thing in this case is that young woman is going to get murdered in some horrific way. So that's the whole point, is it could wake up in the next chapter of the story, and they pull the hood off of her head and she's tied up. And it's like, okay, well, in other words, we're interested. We're interested in what happens to her. We dread it. Obviously, it's horror. So, needless to say, her end was probably terrible. But it's a prompting in that it
maybe,
could be the next thing. Yeah, well, for all we know, she gets
yeah,
bit by a werewolf, and she
or
she has her vengeance on everyone. Who knows?
she somehow she escapes, or
Or
I
is
mean, there could have been.
rescued by some agency involved that we because
Sure.
that
I
you
mean,
you you set it up well. Go ahead, please.
interesting. I wrote this story fairly early when I was writing Emily, and when I wrote this, I my female characters since then have been not pushovers. Someone who got to this story. She goes over. She goes, "Hey, you what are you doing?" And before Emily, she would have been a meek character. Now it's This is a stand-up young lady that
Sure.
I'm not gonna just let this what do you call it? I'm not gonna let you get away with this. So
Yeah,
timing is also a good thing.
Yeah, and pacing, world building, but also this characterization, the fact that you have 1,000 words to get an archetype of a character down, and then make that accessible, relatable, etc. That's no easy task. And you painted with archetypes like the callous dude. She's the vivacious, vibrant young woman. She's not going to take any guff from anybody, except she is, because she's in a terrible situation. But the point is the attitudes are all there, and those attitudes represent archetypes, and that's because you got 1,000 words. What are you supposed to do? You can't make it a journal entry. You got no budget. You have no budget for that. So what you did is you set it up with that archetype that she's a passionate young woman who's like, no, you're not. What? And she's running around checking stuff out. Like, she's not sitting there like doe-eyed, like, oh no, and that tells us what we need to know about her character in 1,000 words, not 100,000 words, 1,000 words. We at least have the archetype. You delivered it very well. It's a fantastic story, Tom. A Flash, really.
Oh, thank you. And Bob, on the other end, Bob is the sole survivor, one of the sole survivors. The house that burned down behind the drive-in, and he was hoping to he probably headed in for her the whole whole time, but he probably wanted to do it himself. But when she would not sit still, would not be quiet, and he just said, it's out of my hands now. Whoever those people were.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends. There's a lot of wondering that you can do about where his headspace is at. He could just be a killer. He could be someone who's trying to pull her over to his side of maybe he's lonesome. Maybe he's like, oh, maybe she'll like it. Maybe she'll want to be with me in these type of things. I mean, I don't know. It depends on how spaced out this dude is and where his mindset's at. It doesn't sound like he's a very well-adjusted young man. So who knows, But the point is, you did all that in 1,000 words. Where I'm thinking, I'm going to Tom Harris's paradigm of like Mindhunter stuff. Like, this guy a serial killer? Like, what got him started? He was involved in this trauma. And anyway, bravo, Tom.
Thank you. Also, I read a lot of true crime and unsolved mystery things, and there's a lot of cases where a young man will entice a young woman to be his accomplice in all these incredibly heinous things. So that might have been on his mind too.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, because then it gets it far more complicated, because then he's interested in her mentality. She's not just like a doll to be dissembled in his by his psychopathic tendencies, his murderous leanings. He's looking for a friend to share it with, and maybe. Maybe is the key. The point is I'm reaching out in those directions, because I'm like, Tom's got something. We could have a whole other show just about, like, if you were writing a novel about it, where it would go next. But let's let it lie where it is. It's a great Flash, and I'm gonna think about that, man. You dig up your Flashes. Maybe we'll do one of those a month for a couple months and see, because Flash is a very useful exercise. Well, look at that, folks. Time flies when you're having fun. There's nothing like a good creative plunge like that. And when it comes to Flash and shorts, Tom's got it. And I think we went about it dissecting that process, because there's a lot of it's upstairs with Tom, because he's a pantser, so it's all in his unconsciousness. So asking him these questions is like pulling apart the mystery of it. Because me, I could show you how I lay a flash out. That's for me. That's a bunch of budgets. It's 100 budget, and then it's beginning, middle, and end. And then I like you're saying, maybe I go a little over, whatever. Anyway, point is, maybe we'll do more flash stuff. Maybe I'll even try to dig up some stuff. Anyway, this has been JWC Livestream. Story Autopsy usually does a long read, but we're all over the place today. We had a great show last week with our guest Upen, who's publishing his wonderful book about hotel industry and you know, all that stuff, the hospitality industry, pardon me. So our schedule got turned around a little bit, but I still think it was a great show. Head over to joeswritersclub.com. Check out our author bios and our blogs. Go to joeswriters.club. Sign up for our forums. Check JWC out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, especially on Facebook. We've been getting some new members lately. And head over to YouTube, our YouTube channel, JWC Livestream on YouTube. That's Joe's Writers Club. Please like and subscribe and share to anyone who you think will like the content. That's not just people who read this stuff, but who want to learn, who want to improve their writing. Because there's a lot of data in a show like this, as far as especially this Flash thing. You know, that's like a crash course in Flash, what we just did. And JWC, you know, I like to say we can help you be a better writer, but you really have to do that yourself. We can help you be a different writer. And sometimes that makes all the difference, learning little tricks of the trade and whatnot. But you got to put the work in. I mean, how many flashes have you written in your life, Tom? How many short stories? How many have you read? I mean, it's probably countless.
Yeah, hundreds.
Yeah. So it's like you got to put that work in. But if it's a creative obsession and there's a love for it in your heart, it's not work. It's play. It's nothing but fun. So, I mean, Tom, you probably had a blast writing that story, you know?
Yeah, it was fun. It was wondering. So a lot of times I write and I wonder where it's going, and all of a sudden it's there, you know? So.
Yeah, right on, man. Well, thanks a lot for watching, folks. And we'll, you know, tune in again next week. We got a little schedule shift. Next week, we're going to start doing Nidhogg and this show both the same day. Try that out for a while. So thanks a lot for listening, and we'll see you again real soon. Stay